The cartel thugs thought they had an easy target. A lone trucker, parked on the side of a dusty desert road, seemingly unaware of the danger closing in. They circled his rig, rifles raised, ready to take what they wanted. But as he turned, their cocky grins disappeared. This was no ordinary driver. If you love stories about tough truckers, high-stakes showdowns, and outlaws getting what they deserve, then hit that subscribe button. Don't miss the next jaw-dropping story. Join us now. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast ocean of sand and jagged rock formations under the blistering afternoon sun. Heat waves shimmered over the cracked asphalt, distorting the horizon like a mirage. The highway was long and lonely, with nothing but the occasional tumbleweed rolling across the road. It was the kind of place where trouble brewed, and today, trouble had found its next victim. Miles away from civilization, a lone 18-wheeler roared down the desolate stretch of highway, its massive chrome grille reflecting the unforgiving sun. The truck was a beast, weathered with years of hard miles, its engine humming with a deep, steady growl. The rig's exterior was caked with dust, but it was well kept, its tires hugging the road with the kind of confidence that only came from a seasoned driver. Inside, behind the wheel, sat a man who had seen more than his fair share of danger. His hands, calloused and scarred, gripped the wheel with a quiet certainty. His square jaw was covered in silver stubble, and his piercing eyes, hidden behind dark aviator shades, scanned the road ahead with calculated patience. He wasn't just any trucker. He was a man who had lived through war zones, a veteran who had traded battlefields for highways, but never lost his instincts. The radio crackled with static, then silence. The CB had been oddly quiet for the past few miles. Too quiet. He reached for his thermos, taking a slow sip of bitter black coffee, his gut churning with the unease that came from years of experience. Something wasn't right. Then, in the side mirror, he saw it. A dust cloud. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint disturbance in the otherwise still desert. But then, the vehicles appeared. Two black SUVs speeding toward him from the rear, their dark-tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. They weren't just passing through. They were closing in. He exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on the wheel. This wasn't some random highway patrol. These were men who didn't want to be seen. And they weren't alone. Up ahead, just past the next rise, another set of vehicles appeared, parked across the road like a blockade. The veteran trucker's jaw clenched. This was an ambush. His mind worked fast, calculating the possibilities. Speeding through was an option, but they'd likely try to force him off the road. Stopping meant surrendering control. Neither choice sat well with him. He wasn't the kind of man who took orders from anyone, least of all from a gang of cartel enforcers who thought they had him cornered. Reaching down, he felt for the familiar weight tucked beneath his seat, a weapon he hadn't needed in years, but never traveled without. His fingers wrapped around the grip, his instincts kicking in like muscle memory. This wasn't just a truck. This was a fortress on wheels. And if they wanted a fight, they had no idea who they were up against. The moment the 18-wheeler slowed, the two black SUVs flanked it like wolves circling wounded prey. The cartel gunmen inside had been expecting an easy takedown, a lone trucker on an empty highway, miles away from anyone who could help. A voice crackled through a megaphone from one of the vehicles up ahead. "Pull over now, no sudden moves." The veteran trucker didn't even blink. He'd been in worse situations before. His heartbeat remained steady, his breathing controlled. He wasn't some rookie who panicked under pressure. One SUV sped ahead, cutting across the road in front of the truck, forcing him to a full stop. The second SUV screeched to a halt behind him, boxing him in. Doors swung open, and masked gunmen spilled onto the asphalt, their weapons raised and ready. "Step out of the truck!" one of them barked, his thick accent cutting through the desert silence. The trucker sighed, cracking his knuckles. He reached for the door handle but hesitated just long enough to scan the situation. There were 5 of them, 2 in front, 3 behind, all heavily armed, all cocky. "Now, viejo, hands up!" Slowly, he swung the door open and stepped out, his boots hitting the hot asphalt with a deliberate thud. He kept his hands raised just enough to make them think he was cooperating, but his eyes, those cold, steel-gray eyes, never showed fear. One of the gunmen, a younger guy with tattoos running down his neck, approached first. He looked the trucker up and down, sneering. "Where's the cargo, old man?" The trucker didn't answer. He just smirked. The leader of the group, a taller man with a scar running from his cheek to his chin, stepped closer. "We know what you're carrying," he growled. "You hand it over, we let you live." The trucker rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck as if loosening up before a fight. "You boys have made a real bad mistake today." The gunmen laughed, their weapons still trained on him. One of them prodded him in the chest with the barrel of his rifle. "Is that right, viejo? And what exactly are you gonna do?" The trucker's smirk widened just a little. Then, without warning, his right hand shot forward, grabbing the nearest gunman's wrist in a vice grip. With a quick twist, the man's finger slipped off the trigger, and the weapon clattered to the ground. In one fluid motion, the trucker yanked the man toward him and drove a brutal elbow into his throat, sending him crashing down. The moment the others reacted, it was already too late. The trucker ducked low, using the open truck door as cover. A shot rang out, shattering the side mirror. Another gunman moved in, but the trucker was faster, grabbing a tire iron from under his seat and swinging it hard. They thought they had him cornered. But this fight had just begun. The silence after the first few strikes was deafening. The gunman, clutching his throat, wheezed on the ground, his weapon forgotten in the dust. The others hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough. The trucker seized his moment. With the tire iron still in his grip, he swung low, cracking it against the shin of the nearest gunman. A sickening crunch followed, and the man collapsed with a howl of agony. Now, the cartel thugs weren't laughing. They were scrambling. The leader, the one with the scar, finally snapped out of his shock and shouted, "Kill him!" But the trucker was already moving. He ducked behind the truck's open door, using it as a shield just as the first shots rang out. Bullets punched through the metal, but he wasn't inside. He had already rolled beneath the trailer, using the massive vehicle as cover. The gunmen spread out, trying to surround the truck. But they were making a fatal mistake. They were thinking like street thugs, not soldiers. And this trucker? He wasn't just a trucker. He had fought in more battles than these punks could imagine. As the first gunman rounded the back of the trailer, the trucker was waiting. He lunged out from beneath the vehicle, grabbing the man's ankle and yanking him to the ground. Before he could react, the trucker drove his boot into the thug's face, knocking him unconscious. The others hesitated. The fear was setting in now. This was supposed to be an easy job, a simple hijacking. Instead, they were being picked apart by one man. Scarface barked orders. "Flank him! Flush him out!" 2 men rushed to the side, attempting to cut off his escape. The trucker heard their footsteps crunch against the gravel, measured their movements, then acted. He reached inside his cab, pulling out something he hadn't needed in years. A pump-action shotgun. The sound of the slide racking was like a thunderclap in the desert. Scarface froze. The other gunmen exchanged nervous glances. The trucker stepped out from behind the trailer, leveling the shotgun at them. "You boys sure you want to keep going?" A long, tense pause stretched between them. Then the trucker's finger tightened on the trigger. The moment stretched, thick with tension. The cartel gunmen, once so sure of their dominance, now found themselves at the mercy of a lone trucker who wasn't just some aging road warrior. He was something far more dangerous. Scarface gritted his teeth, trying to regain control. He signaled for the others to spread out, but they hesitated, glancing between the shotgun in the trucker's hands and the bodies of their fallen comrades. The trucker didn't move. His stance was rock solid, his eyes locked onto Scarface. "You've got 3 seconds to walk away," he growled. Scarface sneered but didn't back down. "You think we're afraid of one old man?" The trucker's grip on the shotgun didn't waver. "Number. But you should be afraid of what's coming next." Scarface scoffed, but something in the trucker's tone made him pause. His men shifted uneasily. Then they heard it, the distant roar of engines. At first, it was barely noticeable over the desert wind, but it grew louder, closer. The cartel gunmen exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't the sound of law enforcement. It was something else. Scarface spun around, scanning the horizon. Then he saw them, a convoy of rigs kicking up dust as they tore across the highway toward them. Trucks, at least 6 of them, their chrome grills gleaming under the desert sun. But these weren't ordinary truckers. These were his people, the Brotherhood of the Road. Men who had spent decades looking out for each other, protecting their own. Scarface cursed under his breath, his bravado slipping. "Call in backup!" he barked at one of his men, but there was no time. The first truck barreled off the road, skidding into position behind the cartel gunmen, boxing them in. More followed, surrounding the gang like a pack of wolves circling wounded prey. The cartel thugs went for their guns, but they weren't fast enough. Truck doors swung open, and men stepped out. Men who had seen their fair share of fights. Former soldiers, ex-bikers, truckers who had spent years dealing with highway robbers. And every single one of them looked ready for a war. Scarface's breathing quickened. "This wasn't the plan," he muttered, backing up. The trucker smirked. "Plans change." One of the cartel gunmen made a move, raising his rifle. He didn't get the chance to fire. The lead trucker, a burly man with a thick beard and a sleeveless denim vest, swung a crowbar into the gunman's wrist, sending his weapon clattering to the ground. The fight was over before it even began. One by one, the cartel thugs dropped their weapons, hands raised in surrender. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely trapped. Scarface was the last to lower his gun, rage burning in his eyes. "You think this is over?" he spat. The trucker took a step forward, leveling the shotgun at him. "I think you're over." Scarface clenched his jaw, but didn't move as 2 truckers grabbed him, yanking the weapon from his grasp. The trucker finally lowered his shotgun, exhaling slowly. His brothers took care of the rest. The cartel thugs were stripped of their weapons, tied up, and tossed into the back of a trailer. By the time law enforcement arrived, the scene was already handled. One officer, a sheriff with a knowing look in his eye, walked up to the trucker. "Same story as last time?" he asked. The trucker shrugged. "They tried to hijack the wrong truck." The sheriff sighed. "Damn cartels never learn." He waved his men forward, and the officers loaded the cartel members into squad cars. The trucker watched, his grip tightening on the shotgun. He knew this wouldn't be the last time someone tried something like this. The road was dangerous, and men like Scarface always came back in one form or another. But so did men like him. As the convoy of truckers climbed back into their rigs, engines roaring to life, the truckers smirked. "Let's get back on the road, boys." And just like that, they were gone. Ghosts of the highway, leaving nothing behind but the lesson that some men should never be underestimated. The dust settled on the desert road as the convoy of truckers pulled away, engines growling like a pack of wolves moving on after dealing with a threat. The cartel thugs were in police custody, stripped of their weapons, their power shattered. The lone trucker, now just another face in the crowd, watched from the driver's seat as the flashing lights of law enforcement disappeared into the distance. He knew the fight was over, but something in his gut told him that men like Scarface always found a way back. That was the nature of the road. It was wild, unforgiving, and men like him had to be even tougher to survive it. As he shifted gears and pulled his rig back onto the asphalt, he thought about the younger truckers coming up behind him. Men and women who didn't yet understand how dangerous the open road could be. They saw trucking as just a job, a paycheck at the end of a long haul. But out here, it was something more. It was about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. It was about watching each other's backs, because no one else would. He had learned that lesson the hard way, years ago, when he first started driving. Back then, he had been just another rookie, fresh out of the military, looking for a way to escape the ghosts of his past. But the road had a way of teaching you, and today, it had taught Scarface and his gang the same lesson he had learned long ago. Never underestimate the wrong trucker. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, he reached for the CB radio and clicked the mic. "Brotherhood's still alive," he said simply. A crackle of static, then a response. "Damn right it is." The voices of other truckers filled the channel, men and women who had been listening in, following the events as they unfolded. They were out there, scattered across the country, keeping the highways moving. But they all understood one thing. The road belonged to them, not to the criminals, not to the gangs. And as long as truckers like him were still out here, watching over it, the Brotherhood would stand strong. The trucker sighed, resting his hand on the wheel. He had miles to go before the next stop. Another load to deliver. Another night on the road. But he wouldn't be alone. Because out here, where the law was thin and the dangers were real, there were still men like him. Men who didn't back down. Men who answered only to the call of the open road. He pressed down on the accelerator, feeling the rig surge forward, the wind howling past his window. Another day, another mile. And as long as there were truckers out here willing to stand their ground, the road would always belong to the right people.